Hey everybody, this is Daarken with Enlightened.com, and in this tutorial I'm going to talk to you about some still life painting. And, since I'm launching this site, I kind of wanted to have a little bit more for people to watch on here instead of just a couple videos where I'm not actually painting. So I wanted to throw in a couple little teasers, I guess, of kind of what's going to be coming. And still life painting is a big part of learning how to be an artist, and when you go to art school, you pretty much start off with still life painting before you even do any figure drawing. So that's what I'm going to do here. So I have this picture of this metal pot, and I'm just going to start sketching out the outline for it with the brush tool. And I think I'm using either the chalk brush or the round brush. And I'm just trying to transform this ellipse so that it's correct, because it's a little hard to draw with a tablet a lot of times, especially when you're doing line drawings. It's hard to control it. Now if you're using a Cintiq, it's a lot easier to control since you actually are drawing on the surface, but with the tablet you're not looking at your hand or anything, so it's kind of hard to get control of these shapes. Now for this tutorial I'm not going to be worrying about color. It's just going to be strictly a grayscale study. And you always do that when you start out as a student because, you need to focus more on form and value and worry about color later. If you can get the form and values correct, then whatever you do in color is pretty much going to work. So I'm just looking at these different shapes and I'm just trying to recreate them over here. And I'm comparing each shape to the other to try and put things down accurately, because I'm not drawing a grid or anything, so I'm just eyeballing everything. So I'm kind of looking at each shape as to how it relates to the next shape to try and get it in the correct position. And I'm flipping my image. If you'll notice, when I flipped it, you can see that my ellipses are really off. And I'm not too worried about that right now because I know that I'll be changing things as I go into value and actual painting. But if you want, you can select the lasso tool, and I'm just moving this top part over a little bit. And I'm flipping again so I can check the changes because it was off a little bit to the side. Now I have my line drawing on a separate layer from the background, so that allows me to select different parts of my line drawing and move it without having to move the background at all. And I'm also keeping it separate so that I can do the line drawing on one layer, and then underneath that I'll start the value, and then once I have the basic values in place, then I'll start a layer on top of everything and paint opaquely so that I can get rid of the line drawing. So you can see I'm having a little bit of a problem drawing these ellipses down at the bottom, just because of the accuracy with the tablet isn't very good. You'll notice I'm also trying to keep things a little bit angular, especially with this spout over here. I tend to draw more angular when I'm doing my line drawing. It's just because it tends to look a little bit better. You'll notice I'm also drawing both sides at the same time, so I'm trying to be a little more accurate by going up and down both sides of the drawing. Now again, this is just me mapping out the shape, so I don't have to be completely accurate. If you'll notice, my pot isn't quite as wide on the bottom as it is in the reference, so I'm going to fix that by going to Edit, Transform, and Distort, and I'm just going to pull these bottom handlebars out a little bit, and you'll notice that the bottom becomes a little bit wider. So I'm flipping back and forth so you can see the changes, and flipping it again. And I can go ahead and start adding in the values. I'm just going to add a new layer below the line drawing. And I'm not going to color pick from the photo because I'm going to try and eyeball these values myself. That'll help you learn values better if you just try and eyeball things instead of relying on color picking. Now I'm not going to start off with the darkest darks or the lightest lights. I'm going to start off with the middle gray, and I'm just going to block in most of this pot here. So you can see this part over here, it's, you know, a lot darker in the photo, but I like to build up to my values. I don't like to, you know, go straight for the darkest dark, because then it's a little bit harder to judge some of the other values in your painting. So I'm lightly blocking in this reflection down here on the bottom. And I'm using this square chalk brush. I like using this brush a lot. It has a lot of good texture, and since it's flat, it's able to paint planes really well. So I'm just going to go in with the darker value now and block in some of this dark area over here. Now, one of the things about painting metal and making it actually look like metal is that metal has a lot of areas of really high contrast that are right next to each other. So if you look at the reference, you know, over here you have this really dark, and then, you know, right up there you have, you know, this strong highlight. So you're going to have areas where maybe it's like, you know, a 7 or 8 in the value scale, and then right next to it you're going to have like a 2 or 3. And those types of things are what are going to help you create different types of textures in your painting. One thing I noticed a lot of beginner digital artists doing is that, you know, whenever they paint something, everything looks the same, like it's all painted in the same way, and there's no variation in texture. So learning to paint something that looks like metal, or something that looks like cloth, or something that looks like wood or plastic, that's one of the very important skills of an artist. And I think digital has a problem with that, because, you know, you are using flat round brushes a lot of times that don't really have texture, so it can kind of have this digital feel to it. So if you use some of the textured brushes, that might help a little bit, or you can import texture overlays, or you can just learn to paint different textures using the round brush, which is what I usually do. A lot of times I only use the round brush and I just paint in the textures myself. The other way they can show things are metal by just painting in textures is adding in little nicks and scratches and highlights on those nicks and scratches to show that it's a reflective surface, and that it, you know, those scratches are in a hard surface that are going to have this hard, sharp highlight to them. So again, I'm painting all these values on a layer underneath the line drawing. That way I can preserve the line drawing as sort of a guide for this early stage of the painting. Now when I go later on into the painting, I'm going to create a layer on top of that and paint opaquely so that I can get rid of that line drawing. Because as you can see right now, you know, the line drawing is a little bit messy. It's not very accurate in some areas. And a lot of those things are going to be fixed as I'm adding in these values. And also, I don't want it to have this like cartoony, like coloring book style to it with a line around it. I want it to look like the actual photo. So if you'll notice, some of my ellipses are still kind of off, and the shape of the pot is still a little bit different from the reference. So I'm just going to go in and fix those things again. But since I have my values and layers on, or values and line drawings on different layers, I'm going to select both by holding down Shift, and then go to Edit, Transform, and Distort, and this will distort both of the layers simultaneously. And I'm just pulling the lower handlebar out a little bit and flipping my image just to check to see how my ellipses are. Like some of the round parts on the top are a little bit off still. You have to go in and fix that later. So this over here, this little ding on the side, this is one of those things I was talking about. Those little details that you can add in to show that something's metal. You know, you're going to have this dark shadow and then like this highlight right under it. And when you're looking for things to set up in your house, you know, pick something that's interesting and has a little bit of character to it, and make sure the lighting is good on it. You don't want to paint something with really flat lighting, because you're not going to learn a lot through that. So again, on my values that I'm painting right now, a lot of them I'm just color picking off the values that are already on my canvas, and I'm doing that by, well, on mine, one of my buttons is bound to Alt, but if you just press Alt on the keyboard, that's the eyedropper tool. A lot of my base values are here now, so I'm going to go in and start adding in some of the highlights. And I'm going to add this sharp highlight on the edge right here. And I'm actually painting on a layer above the line drawing so that I can paint over that line, because I don't want that line to be there anymore. So again, I'm using that rectangular chalk brush. And I just created a layer mask on the line drawing because I want to paint out some of these lines, but I want to keep them there in case I ever want to go back to them. So, the layer that you want to make a mask on, you just select it and hit that little button below the layers. It's like the gray square with the white circle in the middle. And if you do that, it'll create a layer mask, and if you paint in black on the mask, it'll hide whatever's there, and if you paint in white, it'll reveal it. So again, I'm back up to the opaque layer on top of everything, and I'm just adding in some of the details of this handle, of how it's attached to the pot. You'll notice that I'm not zooming in on these things either. I'm just trying to paint zoomed out, just trying to leave this a little bit loose. I'm not worried too much about doing a crazy photorealistic painting. I'm just trying to do this fairly quickly. And so what I'm doing is I'm looking at the reference and I'm trying to see what patterns these different values make, and then I'm just trying to mimic them on my painting. So I'm not thinking of, what it is I'm painting per se, but rather what shapes do I see that I need to replicate. So I'm not thinking of this as like an entire metal pot. I'm thinking, this gray right here makes this shape, so I need to mimic that, and then next to it is a darker gray that makes this other shape, so I need to try and copy that. And that might help people to become less intimidated maybe by painting some of these things. Just break them down into shapes. And since you're using reference, you have the shapes, right there. So you can kind of look and see, what shape is this making? So, okay, it's doing this, so I just need to mimic that. So this highlight over here makes a gradation down the side of the pot. So I'm just color picking and then lightly painting down. A lot of people ask me how I blend when I'm painting, and it's just varying the pressure on the tablet. So the lighter I press, the less opaque the paint's going to be. So I just lightly paint over something and then gradually press down harder to make that transition. And I do a lot of color picking too. So I'm not really doing anything special in order to blend other than varying the pressure on my tablet. Going in with a little bit of a stronger highlight up here for the edge of this up here. You'll notice this was what I was talking about before with metal objects, is you have areas of very strong contrast right next to each other. So you have this really dark right next to this bright light over here. So again, these edges I'm not being too careful with. I'm not zooming in or anything. I'm just trying to get the basic idea. If I was being really crazy and photorealistic, I'd probably be setting up a grid and everything to make sure everything is completely accurate. But, I'm just eyeballing everything, so I'm not really worried too much about that. Because, this exercise is just to help you understand form and value It's not to create a photorealistic painting that's 100% accurate. I mean, I kind of like having that hand-drawn look to something. I don't like something that's completely accurate and straight, and because then it just looks mechanical and doesn't really have that much life to it, which is one of the reasons I don't really use straight lines at all in my paintings. Like, I usually try and freehand everything. Like, a lot of times people are like, oh, how'd you get that to be so straight? And they don't realize that I sit there and I draw the line and then hit undo, and then I draw a line again and I hit undo, and I keep doing that until I get the correct line that I'm trying to get. It's not that I'm using a ruler or straight edge or anything. It's just that I'm redrawing the same line 15 times until it looks correct. So some of these little things in here in this dark area, those are actually just reflections. I think it's a reflection of the person that's taking the photo. So I'm not really too worried about what they are. I'm just kind of putting them in there to hint that those are reflections, but it doesn't really matter if you can completely make out what it is. So you'll notice too, a lot of my outlines and a lot of my edges are a little bit fuzzy, and I'm going to go back and fix those later. I'm just kind of working inside the painting right now. And like that bottom ellipse down there is really off right now, but I'm going to go back and fix that later. But looking back at this is really bugging me, like how off some of these ellipses are. But you have to tackle one thing at a time, so you have to get around to those things later. So you see, I'm color picking the background on some of these areas, and I'm painting around the shape, so that way I'm cutting into the painting to try and sharpen up some of these edges, like over here. Like, I'm not too worried about painting the background around the object. Sometimes if I'm doing like character designs and I need to try and keep things on different layers, I'll need to be aware to not do that, because then if you turn off a layer and then you turn on another layer and you notice that this thing has part of the background painted around it, that can sometimes cause problems if you're wanting it to be on a transparent background. So a lot of times, when I'm doing that, I end up forgetting, because this is how I usually paint. I usually don't really keep things on different layers too much. So like if I'm doing a character design and I need to keep like the gloves on a separate layer so I can turn them on and off, because a lot of times clients like to turn on and off different options. But sometimes I forget and I paint around the glove with the background color, but then if they turn off something else, then they notice that the background color is only around that one part of the glove, so then I have to go back and fix that. So I'm going down here and trying to fix the ellipse on the ground. Flipping my image, you can see that it's still kind of wonky, so I'm just trying to fix that a little bit. And I have my shortcut key to Command F that flips my canvas, and you can just bind all of your own shortcuts. I'm not going to really worry about painting the rest of the table. I'm just going to have this reflection down here, because that's just more stuff to have to worry about, and I'm not really worried about that right now. I just want the object to at least be grounded, so adding in this shadow and then the reflection will help ground it enough. And this reflection down here, I'm just being really loose. I want to keep it a little bit blurry, Just adding in some of the reflections down here. You'll see I didn't really like that shape I made, so I just undid it. You know, a lot of the painting process is just refining your painting. I mean, that's pretty much all I'm going to be doing for the rest of this tutorial now. I mean, I pretty much have everything down. I have most of my values in place. So I'm just going in and refining things and fixing a few little errors and sharpening up edges and adding in those last little highlights and shadows. So, I mean, a lot of times you can get a lot of the painting done within a fairly short amount of time, but then you could spend hours or days refining it. And the other thing people always ask me is, how do I know when a painting is finished? And that's one of those things that's really hard to put into words, and it's not like I really come to a point where I'm like, hey, I'm done. It's usually, hey, my deadline is here, so I guess I'm done. I mean, a lot of times you just run out of time, so you just have to work with the time you're given, and whatever you can accomplish within that time frame, that's pretty much when you know you're finished, I guess. A lot of times, if you think you're done, you're actually not really finished. You have like another 10 or 15% to go. So what I like to do a lot of times is when I think I'm finished, I put down my painting and then I don't look at it for a day or two, if I have time. And then I come back to my painting, and then I usually see something that I needed to fix or something I need to work on or change, because a lot of times you need to look at your painting with fresh eyes. So it's good to put your painting down for a couple days and then come back to it. Because if I don't do that, a lot of times when my painting comes out, I'll notice something that I wish I could have fixed, but it's too late because it's already in print, And a lot of times it's hard to go back to a painting that you finished like 6 months ago. Because I always say, oh, I'm going to go back and fix that, and then I never do. This handle up here is pretty thin metal, but you'll notice that it still has width, and it still has a dark edge, and then it has this little highlight on that edge of where it turns form. So even though you have a really small object, you're still going to have the same things that a larger object has. You're going to have the dark side and the light side, and you're going to have the width, and then you're going to have the highlight on it. So just because it's a smaller object, don't forget about those things. Like this handle, like the top part of the handle, it's pretty much just like this middle tone gray on the top, and then a darker, really thin edge just to show that it has a little bit of thickness to it. And then that's pretty much all you need to paint for that. Like over here on this one, it's pretty much the same thing. It has this middle tone gray and then this dark edge to it, and then like a little highlight up on the top left corner. Even with only 3 values and a very simple shape, you can still create something that has shape and form. So you don't have to be incredibly detailed in order to describe form. Just throwing in like those couple little highlights, you automatically understand what the form is and what it's doing. So that's another part of these exercises, is trying to create shape and form with the least amount of brush strokes. Which is also why I don't zoom in, because staying zoomed out, I can try and conserve my brush strokes. So I'm just flipping my image again and zooming out a little bit just to check to see how the values and everything are reading. You can see over there in the top right, the navigator window has a small version, so you can always just look over there to see how everything's relating. I'll notice that my ellipses are still off. Like this top ellipse up here is a lot higher on the right side than on the left side. Like this whole shape is hard to paint because it's pretty much all ellipses, and ellipses are probably one of the hardest things to paint, at least for me. I mean, especially using a tablet, because it's kind of hard to make those rounded shapes and have them actually look correct. So, I mean, you're probably going to see me flipping back and forth quite a lot to try and fix those ellipses. And I might have to do like a distort or a warp a little bit just to fix some of my shapes. And if you notice something that's off in your painting, don't be afraid to use like the distort or warp tool. Like those tools are there to help you. It's not like cheating. Like you shouldn't feel bad because you fix your painting. I mean, knowing what you need to fix and then knowing how to fix it, that's the mark of a good artist. Just looking at my painting, I can already tell that my pot is a lot taller and skinnier as opposed to the reference. But I mean, that's a quick and easy fix that I can do at the end. I can just distort it to squish it down and make it a little bit fatter. So I mean, I don't want to have to worry about completely repainting everything, because I know that I have this tool that will help me fix things without having to redo everything, which is the great part of digital. You can make changes and fix things quite easily. It saves a lot of time. So again, just going in and refining some of these shapes and fixing some of the edges and adding in the darks and the highlights. And you'll notice that usually when I add in highlights, I use very sharp brush strokes, and then for some of the darker areas I can be a little softer. So I'm trying to vary my edges by having sharp highlights and then softer shadow shapes. So like these highlights over here are going to have a sharp edge to them. A lot of times metallic objects will have sharp highlights like that. Another thing people always wonder about is layers, and they want to know when they should use layers and how do you know when to make a new layer. And don't really worry too much about that right now. I mean, I'm using 3 layers, and I'm not really too bogged down in like the digital side of things. Like I'm trying to treat this as traditionally as possible. Like if I was doing this in oils, I would have done the line drawing in like a burnt umber, and then I would have blocked in the values, and then I would have painted opaquely on top of that, which is pretty much exactly what I'm doing here. I have the line drawing on a layer, I block in the values under it, and then I paint opaquely on top of it. But I mean, right now I'm even painting the background around everything. So I mean, I'm kind of painting on one layer in effect. So I mean, don't get too worried about when you should use layers and everything, because I mean, it's going to come naturally. You're going to know when you want to use a new layer. Like maybe you're going to make a change that you're not really sure about, so you can make a new layer, because if you don't like it, you can just delete that layer. But I mean, I try to treat things as traditionally as possible. So I pretty much have most of this pot finished. I just have to finish off the spout a little bit, and then sharpen up some of these outside edges, and then I'll do like the distort at the end to fix the actual shape, or the overall shape. Other than that, everything's pretty much done. I'm just kind of looking around for areas that I can fix to make a little bit more like the reference. Actually, when I was painting this the first time, I got to this point in my painting, and you can see how I'm just kind of like moving around, like just trying to look for stuff to paint. I kind of forgot that I had the entire spout left to paint. So I thought I was finished, and then I was like, oh wait, I still have the spout that I have to do. I'm going in now and working on that. And I've actually done that with some of my professional paintings. Like, a lot of times I have so many different elements, or when I'm doing multi-figure paintings that have like, 8 figures in them. Like, I'll get to this point where I think I'm finished, and then I'm looking over the painting and I realize, oh man, I totally forgot to paint out like half this guy's entire body. So this spout is pretty much just a tube, and painting tubes is pretty easy. So you'll have like this main base value that I'm painting right now, and then a lot of times you can just put a highlight like going down the middle of it, and you're pretty much done. Like, that will kind of convey the idea that this is a tube. But I mean, sometimes you can put in a couple other little transitional values. But I mean, even just having that main color and then the highlight going down the middle, and then maybe like one core shadow on the edge, like, that's pretty much all you need to describe the form of a tube. Like, this one has all these different reflections in it. Like, it has these reflections over here, which are probably reflected from that side of the pot over there. So it's reflecting over onto the spout. That's the other thing to be aware of when you're painting metal, to make it look more like it's actually metal, is metal reflects a lot of things. So like, maybe if you're painting a metal pauldron on someone and it's like close to their face, then it might be cool to have some of the skin color of their face like reflecting into that shoulder pad. Those types of little details can help sell your painting. Okay, so I'm looking over this and I can see that my ellipses are off, so I'm flipping. And one of the other tricks to checking things is rotating it 180 degrees so it's upside down. And now I can really see the areas that I need to fix. Like, on the upper right, like, all those ellipses there are completely different than the left side. I mean, sometimes turning something the way you're not supposed to can help you analyze the shapes more instead of thinking of it as a pot. Like, now that it's upside down, you're looking more at the actual shapes instead of what the object is. So that can help with people too. Or like, if you're painting like a spear or something that someone's holding, like, a lot of times it'll look right when it's standing up normally, but if you turn it 90 degrees, you'll notice that your spear is like bent. So I mean, that's one of the tricks to checking things. So I'm just trying to fix these ellipses right now, just repainting some of them. So color picking and fixing that shape. And it's a push and pull. So like, I'm painting in the light part and then I'm painting in the dark part around it. So flipping it again, I'm just gonna paint this white area of this little ellipse that's wrapping around the object. And some of the ellipses down here on the bottom, which is actually the top of the pot, some of these are a little messed up too. Try and fix these really quick. Man, I noticed that that little metal part on the very top round part is like off. It's not in the middle. Like I wish I had selected it and just moved it over a little bit. Yeah, it's one of those things that you notice later on and you're like, man, why did I not notice that before? Alright, so now that I have everything pretty much finished, I can go in and distort the object to make it a little shorter and fatter. So after I clean up some of these edges. And I'm just going to do a copy merge, so I'm just going to select everything and then do Command Shift C, which will copy everything, and then paste it. And then I'm going to just do a regular transform, so just Command T. And I'm just pulling the top handlebar down to make it fatter. And then going to Edit, Transform, and Distort, and I'm going to pull those bottom handlebars down again so that the bottom ellipses are a little bit wider than the top ones. And just flipping it to check my changes, so that's a little more accurate to the actual reference. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this painting. Might rotate it a little bit, but yeah, I hope you learned a thing or two about still life painting, and set up your own still life at home, because these really help you. Yeah, if you have any comments or questions, let me know. Thanks.